Hello everyone, welcome to my very first Monster Hunter World weapon tutorial guides. I'm going to be trying to get at least one of these out per week. Don't hold me to that though, I'm going to try. But first, we're going to start talking about the Greatsword. And if you guys have any ideas of what weapons you want me to do guides on next, please let me know in the comments down below. And if this guide was useful to you in any way at all, please give it a thumbs up. It'll really help me out and would also help me to know that you guys want more of this kind of content. Anyway, let me just get right into the Greatsword. The Greatsword is one of the slowest but most powerful weapons in Monster Hunter. What it lacks in speed makes up for in just raw strength. Just single hit damage is huge in this thing. It has chargeable attacks. It also is usually used in other games as a hit and run weapon. But in Monster Hunter World, they kind of changed it up a little bit so you don't need to necessarily hit and run all the time now. But I'll get more into that in a little bit. Alright, let's get into the basic combos. First off, if you hit triangle, it just gives you a bit of an overhead slash. It does pretty decent damage if you are running and just pull your weapon out. It does actually more damage. One of the funny things about the Greatsword is that if you say hit with the tip of the sword, it does less damage than if you hit with the, let's say, shaft of the sword. So basically, imagine getting hit by a sword, except just the tip. It's not going to do as much damage if you get hit by the entire body of the sword. So it does a lot more damage the closer you are to the monster. And after the first triangle attack, by the way, if you push triangle again, you go into a bit of a slap, which does impact damage. And yeah, eventually you can KO the monster with this. Another combo is using circle, then circle again, gives you a wide slash, then it goes into a tackle. And if you push circle a third time, you go into a jumping overhead slash kind of thing. It's actually pretty decent to get into position you can use if you find yourself in a good spot. You can also hold the triangle again, it goes into a slap, and then goes into a second level charge, but more on the charges in a little bit. If you push triangle and circle, you go into a rising slash. This is really good for trying to cut off monsters' tails if you're stuck under them and you don't have time to, say, charge an attack. You can just keep pushing circle and triangle and circle, and you'll be put into a nice little combo where you swing back and swing across, swing back and swing across. You can also go into a tackle after a roll. So you roll out of the way of a monster attack, then push triangle, and you go right into a tackle attack. Now for your charge attacks. Your first charge is just normal charge slash, which I try to actually avoid for the most part just because it does okay damage, but the other ones are just so much better that I try to focus on those more than the normal charge. And the next charge attack is called strong charge. It is actually really good because you can go into it a bunch of different ways. The first way you can do it is to swing down your just triangle, just pull your weapon out, triangle, and then go into a charge by holding back on your left analog stick and holding triangle. You go right into your heavy charge. Another way is from a tackle. So you can either say push circle, circle again, and then hold triangle. It goes into a strong charge. You can also go into the strong charge from a roll, tackle, and then strong charge. It's actually very useful charge. I use a lot, honestly. But all of this is basically trying to build up to the main charge attack, which is the strongest one in the game. Is the one I try to focus on a lot too. This is called the true charge. The true charge does. Your true charge is going to do more damage than both of them put together, no matter what. In any situation, it's going to do more damage than both of them put together. So if you say charge your attack to be max damage for the first two charges, and then you go into your true charge, it'll do even more damage than the other two. Also keep in mind that all your charge attacks have a visual indicator of when you should be releasing the triangle. So when you burst red, the pulses just turn red and you let go of your triangle, and your sword turns red, that means you are good. You actually did it correctly. Keep in mind when you're charging your attacks to not overcharge. So if you hold the triangle for too long, you can actually go back to a level 2 charge while you're charging your attacks. So when you're charging, watch for the visual indicator when your body turns bright red to let go of the triangle button. If you do not do this at the right time, you will actually do less damage than you normally would do. You can actually cancel your charge attacks by going into a tackle by pressing circle while you're charging your attack. The higher the charge of that attack, specifically, so say if it goes into your body turns red and you get the full charge pulse, and you go into a tackle, it actually does more damage. You can cancel all the way up until you get to your true charge, but if you cancel all the attacks up until true charge, you will actually take a little more time to actually fully charge up your true charge. It takes a little bit more, so I highly recommend just going into a normal slash, going into strong charge, and then going into true charge afterwards. That's what I usually do. It doesn't always hit, so use this when you absolutely are sure you're gonna hit the monster. Air attacks and mounting. The Greatsword is actually very good for mounting monsters, at least from my experience. Just because the mounting debuff actually depends on how much damage you're doing to the monster and how many times you try to apply it. So, there's actually an attack that you can do when you're sliding down a hill. And if you hold triangle to slide down the hill, you grind your sword against the floor and you swing upwards, and then you push triangle again, you plummet your sword down towards the monster. It does a lot of damage. It's actually very good for mounting. You can also climb up fauna like, say, these mushrooms or a wall, and you can jump off and hold your triangle. One cool thing about jump off attacks and sliding attacks is that they cannot be overcharged. So, go crazy. Just hold on as long as you can, and just when you need to let go, let go. After doing a charge aerial attack, you can also go into a strong wide slash. After landing on the ground, just push triangle or circle. You can also go into a strong charge attack on the ground after doing your strong wide slash. It's actually pretty good to get extra damage in there, and it's actually really viable. And lastly, I wanted to actually give some extra details about the tackle. The tackle is really useful in Monster Hunter World. It makes it so the Greatsword does not need to be a hit and run weapon. You can actually stand your ground and take some extra damage, because when you tackle, you essentially make it so you have super armor. You take reduced damage. You still get hit by elements, so you have to be careful about that, but it's really useful. You can stop monsters in their tracks, you can do KO damage, and you can honestly not get staggered backward. It's kind of like having a sturdy mantle on, except it's just a tackle, essentially. You can still, again, take debuffs, but you have to be very careful of when you stand your ground and when not to stand your ground. You kind of have to predict if the monster is going to flinch or not. It's a really good way to stand your ground. However, it doesn't always save you if you're not careful. If you have too little HP, I would not recommend it. You just get reduced damage. You don't get immune to damage, so you have to remember that. And thanks to the tackle, it opens up new avenues of when you should attack, when not to attack, when to get out. So mix it up a little bit. Always remember to know when to run and when to stay. It's one of those attacks. You have to be very careful. But it is very useful, and I've been trying to actually incorporate this into my fighting in the game now more than ever. It makes the Greatsword so much more fun, and I highly recommend you guys practice with the tackle. It's a little hard to get used to, especially if you have played other Monster Hunter games. You have to reprogram your brain into understanding, like, hey, you don't need to run here. You should stay and get a good charge attack off after you tackle. But it's all depending on how you feel about it, honestly. I would recommend practicing with it, see how you feel about it. Either way, you can do a hit and run tactics, or you can absolutely just keep tackling and hopefully get all the damage in there. Okay, so Greatsword's weaknesses. The Greatsword is honestly very good for slower monsters. It can be used to take out faster monsters. I wouldn't recommend it all that much, just because it's really hard to get the hits in if they're moving around so much. You can still do it. If you have the skill and you have the confidence to do it, you can definitely do it. You can honestly kill any monster with any weapon in the game. That's not the problem. It's how well you know the monster, how fast the monster is, and how confident you are with your weapon skills. So you have to kind of pick and choose what monsters you want to fight against. So for example, the Diablos is actually really good for the Greatsword, just because you can straight up tackle through all of his charge attacks and fuck his horns up really badly. But say the Karin is not so good for the Greatsword. It's actually kind of a pain in the ass for someone with a Greatsword to actually take out Karin. It's still doable, but it's not as easy as taking down a more predictable, slower monster. And that's my guide for the Greatsword. Please let me know how I did in the comments down below. Tell me if I could do better. Tell me if you guys want me to do certain things like putting armor skills in the guide or not. I'm not exactly sure. This is my first time doing a guide for Monster Hunter World, and it's weird because I had to relearn everything. That's why it took so long for me to get these guides out, because I have to relearn all the stuff about Monster Hunter World and the way the weapons work, because they're very different from the other games. Not so different that I have to completely change my fighting style, but different enough for me to actually have to try new things, I guess. I still am having trouble with some other weapons. For example, the hunting horn. It's kind of a pain in my ass for me to use. I'm still learning it. And I'm pretty sure that's probably the last guide I do. But let me know what guide you guys want next in the comments down below. Tell me if I did well or not. And see you guys next video. Bye!